Hi, I'm a former higher ed CMO, and I have a confession to make. I feel like a lot of institutional branding falls into the category of a sea of sameness. And so when an institution really stands out, I sit up and take notice. And one such institution is Kettering University. In just 3 years, they have grown their enrollment by more than 50%. And a lot of that is due to the work of my guest today. Jennifer Umberger joined Kettering University in February 2023. As the university's vice president and chief marketing and communications officer, she leads Kettering University's brand strategy, enrollment marketing, and thought leadership to increase visibility and support for Kettering's mission, vision, and pillars of success. She also oversees the university's web and digital strategy, social media, creative production, advertising, public relations, media relations, and the university's magazine. So she's very busy. She has done some phenomenal work. I am so delighted to have her on the show. I hope you enjoy. You're listening to Confessions of a Higher Ed CMO, the podcast where marketing minds in higher ed come to pull back the curtain, spill a little tea, and talk honestly about what it takes to market in this industry. I'm Jaime Hunt, the founder of Solve Higher Ed, author of Heart Over Hype, and a former campus CMO who spent more than 2 decades navigating the weird, wonderful world of higher education marketing. This show is for the strategists, the storytellers, the change agents, and anyone who has ever tried to get Faculty Senate on board with a rebrand. Here we get candid about the challenges and share the ideas that are shaping the future of our field. Sound like your kind of conversation? Then let's get into it. I met Jennifer for the first time, I think in 2023.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, the Cup Wrap conference. And I think you've been at Kettering for 15 minutes.
Maybe 45 days. So yes, we were embarking on all of the exciting things that we'll get to talk about today.
Yeah, I love the Cup Wrap conference. If you're listening to this at the time that it releases, there's still time to register for the Cup Wrap conference. It's fantastic, great people, wonderful conference, cozy, intimate, which I think is great. You get to know people a little bit better. You have more time for conversations. I love it. But one of the things I remember most about Jennifer was her enthusiasm for Kettering and Kettering's mission and what Kettering does in higher education. And you've said to me before in earlier conversations that Kettering is completely unique institution in the United States. And I would love if we just start out by setting the stage. What is the history of Kettering and how is it different from the other schools in the country?
Sure, I'm happy to start there. Kettering University actually spent roughly the first 80 or so years of its history almost as a corporate entity. And it was founded as the School for Automobile Trades in 1919 in Flint, Michigan, which was considered the Silicon Valley of its day. Michigan is the state that put the world on wheels. And so at the time, the industry was looking to understand how to roughly scale the type of engineering talent that it needed. And so our 50-50 model of education was part of our founding, and that's where students rotate from the classroom to paid co-op experiences over the course of their entirety of the program, really resulting in unmatched professional experience. Prior to the 1980s, this model was fulfilled as a sponsorship model. And so students were actually first the employees of General Motors Corporation. And so we were known as General Motors Institution for much of our history. And then the education part was sponsored as part of its workforce development initiative. So in the late 90s, GM had divested of the institution, and the sponsorship model really gave way to the private institution that we are today with a co-op structure, less focused on that sponsorship model. So today we have more than 570 employer partners across the nation and worldwide. And we focus in a breadth of industries from automotive to aerospace and defense, manufacturing, automation, electronics, engineering services, health and medical, supply chain, you name it. We have so many different ties to companies that really have such an impact on the world around us. And so the fact that we've maintained that model whereby the institution expects that actually half of a student's learning experience must take place away from campus is completely unique, and the outcomes are astounding.
Tell me a little bit about the outcomes.
You know, every institution has those hallmark people whose stories they can tell. And for us, it ends up being really a breadth of industries that we can talk about. Certainly, we have such a strong root within the automotive industry. And so whether it's engineering managers or, C-suite executives in finance or engineering or innovation, whether it's the president of Caesars Entertainment in Las Vegas, or actually someone who spoke at Cup Wrap last year, Paul Boscobert is the president of Reuters news organization. The thing that comes from a Kettering education is not only that jumpstart in developing a career and that professionalism that comes along with it, but problem solving as well. And so a lot of our alums speak to the fact that once you know how to go about the process of problem solving, you can apply it to any industry. And so we are right up there with the Ivy League institutions by way of the number of Fortune 500 C-suite CEOs, let alone broader executives among those leadership parts of the organization. So we have no shortage of excellent stories to tell.
I love that you're at an institution that really makes your heart sing and that you feel passionate about. And one of the things that really jumped out to me in our conversations and in your AMA presentation is this idea of the sea of sameness in the higher ed landscape. And I think that goes far beyond marketing. I think that goes into like the delivery of education as well. And Kettering falls well outside that. But I'm really curious about your perspective on that sea of sameness and how did that look for Kettering specifically, particularly given that you are so different from other institutions in the country?
I think a couple of things that as I was gaining a foothold and going through the onboarding myself, there was a lot of kind of riding high on the legacy in the automotive industry that I think maybe fueled what we would consider that sea of sameness in higher ed. Because at the same time, once GM divested of the institution, we were arguably a newcomer to the broader market of higher ed. And so it wasn't until that name change in the late 90s that it necessitated that we make the name for ourselves. And I think we tried to perhaps create language that compared ourselves to traditional higher ed so that we would be seen as a viable option for prospective students, maybe not necessarily intending to muddy the story about who we are and why we're different. Another piece to that, too, is that GM as a corporate entity had been heavily involved in K-12 education and actually did a lot of the recruitment for itself in workforce development, which became the students being educated here. And so sometimes our challenge was that Kettering didn't have as much of a connection in Michigan beyond the automotive industry, the name of Charles Kettering, as much as it did or it does in the state of Ohio, for example. So while the institution had had some really good tactical response about who we were and what we did, we really hadn't come up with the unique way of sharing our why.
When did it become clear that that strategy was no longer aligned with the institution's ambitions and goals for the future?
from my knowledge, it began certainly far ahead of my first interview. So the president and the leadership had certainly talked about what that vision would be. And so coming into this new role, we knew that building brand and brand story and messaging was going to be a critical component of the work that was needed. And so following, I would say, maybe close to a decade of declining enrollment, it wasn't rapid, it was over time. Kettering's challenge again was low name recognition and an untold story that required certainly more than a marketing facelift. We needed to reposition ourselves with more market relevance. So the institutional legacy certainly plays a role in the brand that we have built today. But at that time, the story was dominated by features, not benefits, not proof points and things of that nature. And so those tactical plans, shifted without an overarching strategy and the consistency to build that pipeline. So that's really what I walked into, was a huge opportunity to rebuild that. And the pivotal question that we asked ourselves was, what does it take to matter and to matter differently?
Ooh, I love that question. Tell me more about, where did you ask that question? Who did you ask that question of?
I actually asked that of a lot of people during my interview process. But then as we were starting to socialize the task at hand and the work we were about to embark on, that's a little bit of the question that I posed into those internal groups to make sure that they understood we are going to be looking external to figure out how better to share what we know intrinsically about this place, and to be able to help us bring apart the components that make a great story and the things that we're able to differentiate even better.
So one of the things that you and I have talked about and that you spoke about at AMA is that you redid everything, or basically everything, and you've seen some tremendous success. And I don't want to spoil what that success is, but I think it's important for listeners, as you're listening, to understand a little bit about, we're not talking about this is theoretically going to work. This has worked. And so if you could just touch a little bit on, before we dig into all of the strategies you deployed, what have been some of the successes that you've seen?
The most significant impact has been a 50% increase in new student enrollment since 2023.
That's wild.
So it is wild. It really is. We have been so excited to build year over year the kind of momentum that we knew was always here, the enthusiasm for this type of education. And so what moved the needle most, I think, was the fact that we built an omni-channel strategy that had the full alignment with marketing and communications, with enrollment, and with the entirety of the institutional leadership. We knew we had to solve for multiple ports of entry for prospective students and their families, but also we were careful not to be pressured to roll things out before they were ready for the sake of doing everything all at once. Our model and our new brand actually met the market at a time that it was hungry for hands-on experiential education with exciting outcomes that could easily be shared, industry relevance, and a way to fund your education in the midst of attaining that. One of the hallmarks of Kettering's experience is that co-op program, and students are earning 2.5 years of paid professional experience over the course of their education, often resulting in $55,000 to $75,000 in earnings over those 4.5 years, often more. Some of them are actually netting about 6 figures, depending on the roles that they're growing into within their co-op partners.
Well, they're in college still.
While they're in college still.
Wow. That's
and
amazing.
So it's insane. It truly is insane. Coming from, a very traditional liberal arts environment, it's something that many of us never thought would be a possibility.
Yeah,
let alone a reality for so many.
that's
Um,
tremendous.
Yes, and I would also point to the fact that Kettering's focus, we really had 8, now 9 undergraduate majors, allowed us to focus differently than other institutions with 50, 80, 150 plus majors really could. And because we really had focused on building targeted personas, we've actually fueled the audience development in some very measurable ways as well.
I'm so happy for you. Like, this is just tremendous. And I want to kind of just do a laundry list of all the things that you touched. And please help me fill this in. But you
Mhm.
touched the brand, you touched enrollment management, you touched perceptions of the institution within Flint. You've looked at core and new markets, audience segmentation. You looked at financial aid awarding as well. Like,
Yes.
tell me a little bit more about your strategy roadmap.
Absolutely. We knew that all of those were very important parts of our process, and arguably nailing the brand and messaging strategy and developing those institutional personas have been a game changer. But nothing would have been possible without a unique influx of capital.
Mm.
And that allowed us to unlock the breadth and speed that could help us make a measurable impact with depth. So Kettering had a scrappy little school mentality, but our model and our outcomes certainly deserve to be showcased. And embarking on the work that you outlined, number one, I never anticipated that we would be going into the depth of funding financial aid optimization or other types of activities through this brand building and infrastructure building process. But one day, a strategic investment really changed that game. Our president called me to a meeting to share that we had received a grant, a multi-million-dollar grant, to support the work that we knew we were taking on. And that grant had to be spent within the course of a year.
Wow.
And so, not wanting to look a gift horse in the mouth, I gratefully said thank you, but also reminded him in no uncertain terms that we couldn't just make one big splash with this work. We had to work toward a sustainable operation, let alone a sustainable strategy and budget for the long term. So, what I had anticipated to be a 3-year process actually was completed and in market within 18 months.
Wow.
And none of that could have happened without the right partner.
Who did you partner with on this one?
So, we partnered with Carnegie. One of the reasons being that we knew that the breadth of research, brand building, message and creative building, CRM building, website building, among many of the other things, couldn't necessarily be farmed out to multiple partners. It would have been a disaster to try to manage this process with multiple partners. And so Carnegie's breadth and depth was powered by this grant. And at one point, we had about 12 concurrent work streams running with them, and about 45 members of their team actually augmented my very small team of what grew from 5 to be 8 or 9 of us.
Wow. And I want to circle back to this idea of getting pulled into your president's office and being told that you have millions of dollars to spend. You have to spend it in a year. I feel like that's like the dream. Like, you wake up and you're like, did that really happen? Like, that has to be a moment of feeling like a little bit like Cinderella when the prince shows up with the shoe, but also a little bit like, oh my gosh, I have so much to do really fast.
Yes, that's exactly it. And thankfully that point in time had come following my initial assessment of sort of the scope of where were we with everything from digital to team to, what systems we used, our tech stack, all of those things. And so I had a really good sense of where we needed to make some incremental shifts but we also got to dream a little bit bigger. And I found a really excited and willing partner in our enrollment management VP, Suzanne, whom I presented with at AMA. And we actually got to dream big. What could this look like if we were able to solve for a number of the issues that we were trying to address in one point in time, thereby making the impact of the work we were about to build that much greater?
So every time I have rolled out a new brand or rolled out a new enrollment marketing plan or fill in the blank, a new perception campaign, a new market campaign, it has felt very daunting to my team. To like, this is a whole bunch of really highly strategic work that uses a lot of brain power, a lot of effort, a lot of man hours. And I'm really curious about when you looked at the landscape of everything that needed to be accomplished in 18 months, how did you prioritize that scope without overwhelming your team who's like, oh my gosh, we have to do all of this, but also change fatigue on a campus and getting campus prepared for all of these changes? Like, how did you prioritize what you were going to tackle first and how you were going to communicate around that?
We actually built the timeline and call it the Gantt chart of all of those different work streams so that they could feed off of each other with some overlap. So, for example, the team that helped to build the brand messaging strategy also supplied the writing team to support the writing for the web, the writing for the new admissions email sequences, the writing for all of our new publications. And so I think as I approached my team first about it, certainly they were deer in headlights. This was something bigger than they ever thought we would get to work on too. And so it was important that I got to reassure them that they still get to focus on their day job because, of course, that work can't go away. And that we needed to make sure that the partnership that we built with Carnegie was able to develop that trust and that depth so that they now had a lot of people to learn from, so that when it was our turn to be implementing these things, that we felt very comfortable and confident in the work that we had built together. And I will say this team rose to the occasion. They were all in on what do we need to do next? When can we get started on this? How quickly do you want to XYZ? And one thing I love walking past every day is our content manager's office. He has it essentially wallpapered with all of our print materials because he really saw it as his role to embody this brand with all of the words as he paints those pictures.
So it sounds like your team was really enthusiastic and excited about this. And I will say, in my experience, I've led teams of 75. I've led a team as small as 5. And I will say that the team of 5 we were doing some of the most innovative work because we had to. Like, we didn't have the luxury of having a whole bunch of people that can do the same thing. Like, we had to be super innovative. But that took a lot of professional development and growth for folks to continue to evolve. Like, they were excited about it, but we needed to provide that opportunity. And so I'm curious about how you've leaned into professional development opportunities for your team. And then, of course, how have you leaned into that for yourself?
Absolutely. The team here at Kettering is comprised of very talented tacticians and managers. And so I don't have a large number of, high-level directors working on this work. And so many of those team members were still relatively new to higher education at the time that I joined the institution. So one of the first things that I did with it, in fact, within 45 days of joining the institution, I took my entire team then of 5 additional people to the CupRap conference. I needed to immerse them into that professional community, really focused on advancing higher ed, with so much of a focus at that time on the marketing, the brand building, and web design, and all of those things that were on the agenda that I knew were on our agenda as well. And so I think it helped them to understand that they were part of a much larger set of professionals focused on this type of work. And by being able to meet some of those partners from some of our collaborating organizations, be it part of our tech stack or members of the Carnegie team, I think it really helped them to understand that we weren't going to try to be this small island of people doing this Herculean lift to do all of the things that we needed to. And so I've made it really a mission to prioritize any opportunity for professional development for this team, whether that's conferences or webinars or, experiencing this and that. It's been so important to help them grow as subject matter experts and, grow in their own individual leadership as part of that. And I really have prioritized it in my own career as well. Over the course of time, I've made it a mission to learn all areas connected to our work. So whether that's going to a CRM-focused conference. When I first rejoined higher ed, I went to a couple enrollment management conferences. I needed to make sure that I knew what was the latest and greatest being talked about, or building the strategy so that I could make sure that our work could support that. And so I have been a part of CUPRAP and AMA for a long time. I'm currently serving as vice president for CUPRAP, a role that I have thoroughly enjoyed being a part of that board. And Jamie, working with AMA and the conference planning committee, there are so many energizing subjects and people and ideas that come with that kind of work that by nature just helps you grow and ask better questions and envision your part of this higher education industry as far more connected.
I am so in agreement with you on this. I think that these experiences, webinars, conferences, podcasts, books, whatever, if you ever get to a point where you're like, I'm comfortable, I don't need to learn anything new or know anybody new, you're going to stagnate and you're not going to evolve into the best professional that you can be. And I feel like we spend so much of our time and effort in our careers that why wouldn't we want to be the best that we can be in those spaces? And I would also say that even beyond the sessions at these conferences, I think the hallway conversations where you have somebody that you can say, I have this challenge. How did you solve it? I told Jennifer yesterday that I'm not going to say who because I don't want everybody to call this person, but I had a crisis that was very unique. And when I was Googling, I only could find one other campus that had a similar crisis. And I called that I think he was an AVP at that time. He's now the VP. Left a voicemail because I didn't want there to be a written record of the conversation and said, hey, I have this challenge. Like, can you talk? He called me back within 40 minutes and he was on vacation. And that's the kind of people that work in this industry. And I think I have yet to have someone, as I'm saying that, I'm realizing that's not true. My alma mater doesn't return my phone calls when I call their CMO, but whatever. But I have, besides that person, I've never had somebody say no to like, hey, can I pick your brain about this? Or, hey, I have this challenge. I see that you dealt with it. People are just so giving. And that's honestly the fastest way for your career to grow is to get to know people, see how they're doing things, learn from each other, develop yourself professionally. And then you can do amazing things like what Jennifer's doing. 'Cause what you're doing, Jennifer, isn't you have to have a skill set. You have to have the strategy. You have to have the understanding of omni-channel to be able to do that. And that just doesn't get like beamed into your head when you're born, right? Like you had to
Right.
build up that skill set over work and time and education.
It's so true. And what was the word that we kind of got a chuckle about yesterday? Collaboration, I think.
Yes.
And it's one that I know the robotics community, especially K 12, talks about a lot, is that you're going to learn best from connecting with one another, even if you are in competition with one another. And one of the things that I think we do well is we cheer each other on when we do experience these successes.
It's amazing. I mean, even as a consultant, the way that other consultants have cheered me on, even though I'm in competition with some of them, is just remarkable how people are just so giving in this industry. And I just love that. You talked a little bit about how you were in lockstep with the VP of enrollment in this process. And I'm really curious if you can talk a little bit about how that was important to this process. And did that alignment do anything to change the overall culture, whether between your teams or across your campus?
It absolutely has changed the culture, and not to really toot anyone's own horn, but we've actually heard even from our trustees how the demonstrated alignment in how we present together, how we kind of refer to things that we know that we've discussed together, the fact that our goals are shared and also communicated to one another is something very refreshing for them. And so I think because we have been able to come at this from both sides, enrollment and marketing, the depth of that impact has been able to be socialized throughout the institution, whether that was at the beginning as I first arrived and saying, all right, hold on to your hats, folks. This is what we're going to be embarking on. But also with Suzanne and team and trying to figure out, what is the strategy for our types of outreach, or how do we help the academic side help us to develop those enrollment projections and enrollment goals, and certainly involving them in how to operationalize their parts of the brand story, and constantly working toward that level of excellence is something that both she and I have constant conversations about across the institution. She and I actually began working together within 4 months of my arrival. And so, similarly, though, we've also had a fairly large, turnover in the cabinet in general. So, all of us really came in under Dr. McMahon's vision for what this institution could become. And so, we were all very much encouraged because we've been able to build such a collaboration among the divisions to understand those operational priorities and how we could help each other. And I think a part of it went a long way with, again, that grant funding enabled me to actually say, hey, I know it's not in your budget to do XYZ right now, but it is in mine. And because it's such a strategic priority to bringing this brand to life or giving the students a more seamless experience, here's what we need to do, and I will fund that with you.
Mm.
And so some of those key things, I think, helped us across the university to work together from day one.
Yeah, you mentioned that you helped to fund that financial aid modeling, correct?
Yes. And again, it was one of those things that we knew it was going to be a strategic advantage to us to consider that as part of building this new infrastructure. And so that's why we chose to fund it in that way out of the grant, so that we weren't waiting on that as another piece to this puzzle that needed to be solved a year, 2 or 3 down the road, but that we could actually lay the groundwork now.
This is so smart. I've been having conversations with someone who is trying to align marketing and enrollment for the first time really at their institution. Like they've really operated in a very siloed way for a while. And one of the conversations that we've been having is like, where does it where does the responsibility from one office end and where does the next one pick up? But I think that often you get into a situation where no matter how much you fix on one side or the other, if both aren't humming along at the best optimized way, no matter how good your marketing is, you're going to be let down by sub-optimized whatever that thing is, whether that's financially rewarding or you have apps that sit there forever or fill in the blank, some sort of challenge. And on the flip side, if you have all of those things optimized and humming along, but your brand story isn't strong, it's not resonating with your stakeholders or with your audiences, it's not going to get those students into that pipeline. And so I think the idea of if there are things that you can do to help so that you're not just handing up, okay, here we are, this is the stage where it's your responsibility. If you can help whatever entity it is that has that additional responsibility for success, we're not talking about the success of you as a leader or the success of your division. We're talking about the success of the institution and ultimately, at the end of the day, the success of the students who end up there. And so this sort of territoriality around mine versus yours, I think when that can fade back, when you have a really strong relationship and that fades back, it just really takes the efforts to the next level and allows you to have things like a 50% increase in enrollment. And that's a tremendous outcome of a beautiful partnership. And I have to shout out Brent Schock at Miami University. He was my counterpart. He was the VP for enrollment management, a kindest, most wonderful human being on the planet. My first day, he called up and said, we need to be in partnership. My success is your success. Your success is my success. Like, let's get in there and do it together. And we were able to be so much more impactful. But I do know there's a lot of contentious relationships between enrollment and marketing at times. And sometimes I think if you just stopped thinking about where things start and end, you might be able to get past some of that.
It's so true. And I've been very fortunate over the course of my career to have very collaborative working relationships with enrollment management. And I cannot imagine being able to have the impact that we have in a way that's not like that. But I have often made the entry points by way of seeking to provide value to them and to help them meet their goals, whether that was to approach and say, hey, I noticed an opportunity when I was reviewing XYZ. Can we discuss this? Or can my team take a stab at, or, any number of things. And I don't know if it's just a philosophy of just because it doesn't report to me doesn't mean I can't influence it greatly. I think that's been the mentality that has served me well over the course of my career. And, sometimes it's a leading with shared opportunity. Sometimes it's leading with a, hey, we need to not do this anymore. But nonetheless, I think ultimately having that same goal in mind, that institutional growth and betterment, is the only way that I know how to approach this.
Yeah. I mean, we cannot dig moats around the work and fill it up with piranhas and sharks with lasers on their head. There needs to be no moat. We need to be working together collaboratively. And I think probably most people have that situation, but some people don't. And I think that makes it really difficult to have the kind of success that you have seen. If you could give one piece of advice to a CMO that is sitting in an institution and knows they need to make bold change, but they're not sure where to start or they feel a little stuck, what advice would you give?
I tend to think about it in sort of a set of three things. Number one being to find your champions who are willing to empower you to test and try something new. And that could potentially lead you in a new direction. By all means, I've built institutional brands at 3 institutions, and each had wildly different budgets. And so, you can find your way in through process, no matter what that looks like. But being able to test and try and validate something that does give you an opportunity to differentiate is certainly number one. Building that network, I think, to help challenge yourself and help you navigate the complexity and the ever-changing things within our industry. I think that is certainly a great way to stretch yourself, to avoid feeling stuck. And one of the best investments that an institution ever made in me was actually providing an executive coach. Somebody who had built their own career and certainly had their own struggles and pitfalls, and finding a sounding board that can help you test approaches and things of that nature, I think can be a really useful part of that network. But then number 3 is really sometimes you might need to find some creative funding. Whether that's a local or a regional or national grant, whether that's something that allows you, again, to test and validate an opportunity that you could scale later on. I think that's also something that we don't often think through. Our academic sides are constantly going after grants and additional funding resources, so why not think about it in the same way?
And there's a lot of those opportunities. Our tourism board in one of the cities I was in gave us grants that helped us to pay for billboards and helped us to pay for putting up signage for some of the events we had on campus, like homecoming. You can look for grants that maybe if you're in a public institution, maybe your system office has some grants. There might be alumni that are interested in helping to support the marketing side. And in one institution I'm having conversations with is in that situation where an alumnus is like, hey, I want my degree to be worth even more. So I want to see the university be successful. So I'm giving you some money towards that. There's just a lot of creative thinking that you can do around finances. And I think you make a great point there. That's something for people to definitely think about. If people want to pick your brain, where can they find you?
You can certainly find me on LinkedIn. I am so excited to connect with others, or feel free to reach out to me personally. Jamie, I think you'll have my email address available. So you can find me heavily involved in cup wrap. So again, put a little plug out there. The conference is in March in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. So in person, it's always fun to find opportunities there too.
And I'm really excited to see you at Cup Wrap this year.
You're speaking.
I am. And I actually kind of made PRSA change the time of their conference so I could go to Cup Wrap too. So I'm really excited.
We feel honored.
Yeah. I missed last year because it was my husband's had a milestone birthday. I won't out him on which one. So I had to miss last year, but otherwise, like this one's one that's on my calendar, just like AMA for every year. Listeners, as always, you can find me on LinkedIn, JaimeHunt. You can find me on my website at solvehighered.com, and you can find my book at heartoverhypebook.com. And I do enjoy hearing from you. If you liked this show, please give us a rating or review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen. I really appreciate that. And if you have any ideas for guests, please shoot me a note. And until then, let's go bust some silos. Thanks for listening to Confessions of a Higher Ed CMO. This show is a proud member of the Enrollify Network, home to Higher Ed's largest collection of podcasts. Enrollify is where higher ed goes to grow. So be sure to check out our other podcasts, webinars, video clips, blogs, and more. Visit enrollify.org and subscribe for all the latest details and contact drops directly to your inbox. Enrollify is brought to you by Element 451, the digital workforce platform for higher ed. Learn more at element451.com.